The cold clang of metal against concrete echoed through the vast room. The sound of keys jingling with each step suddenly fell silent. In the suffocating atmosphere of the snake farm, dim fluorescent lights hanging overhead reflected off hundreds of glass enclosures filled with rare reptiles. The last rays of daylight streamed through narrow windows, casting long streaks of light across the cold concrete floor. Occasionally, a soft rustling came from stacked plastic bins, the sound of snake scales brushing against plastic walls. A plastic lid popped open. Rushed footsteps. Then the harsh clink of a gun barrel. Gunshots rang out, piercing and repetitive, in the enclosed space, reverberating against concrete walls and shaking the glass enclosures. Groans of pain, a body collapsing onto the hard floor, footsteps scrambling toward the door. Then, silence. The distinct smell of sawdust, reptile waste, and the pungent stench of reptile feed filled the air, soon overpowered by the metallic tang of fresh blood. Under the flickering fluorescent lights, a crimson trail spread across the floor, following a path of frantic footsteps. A man's hand lay still, fingers slightly curled as if reaching for the exit, each fingernail stained with dark crescents, the mark of someone used to working with soil and animals. On the ring finger, a gold wedding band caught the dim light, a final reminder of vows that had been betrayed. This was the horrifying scene Lynlee Renick stumbled upon when she entered her husband's snake farm on the fateful afternoon of June 8, 2017. Her screams echoed through the quiet facility. Ben Renick, one of the most successful snake breeders in the United States, lay lifeless in his reptile kingdom, in a pool of dark red blood. The snakes in nearby enclosures seemed to sense the disturbance, their movements increasing, creating a strange rustling symphony, as if they were whispering about the fallen master. Benjamin Ben Renick was no ordinary figure in the reptile world. Tall and slender, with neatly trimmed dark brown hair, striking blue eyes, and a warm smile, Ben epitomized the successful young entrepreneur. Those who knew him described him as calm, cautious, and deeply dedicated to his work. In an industry demanding extreme patience and attention to the smallest details, Ben stood out as a master. By age, what terrified other children became a fascination for Ben. He spent hours reading books on snakes, learning how to handle them safely, and gradually started keeping non-venomous snakes as pets. On that fateful day, June 8, 2017, Ben's wife, 31-year-old Lynlee Renick, claimed she had gone to the farm to check on her husband after being unable to reach him by phone. With long, carefully curled blonde hair and a fashion-forward appearance, Lynlee looked out of place amidst the rough surroundings of the snake farm. She owned a small spa called Ascensia Spa in Colombia, about a 45-minute drive from the farm, offering beauty and massage services. The couple appeared to come from two different worlds, Ben with his cold-blooded reptiles, Lynlee with her warm beauty business. According to her statement, Lynlee had tried calling Ben multiple times throughout the afternoon, which was unusual, as he always kept his phone nearby to stay in touch with international clients. Worried, she decided to drive to the farm after finishing her shift. Upon arriving, she saw Ben's truck parked outside, the main warehouse door open, but no sign of him. When she stepped inside, she encountered the gruesome scene. Her husband lying face down in a pool of blood. Her panicked 911 call was recorded, her voice trembling and broken. Although cell service was poor in the rural area, the fear in her voice was unmistakable. She told the dispatcher her husband was. Montgomery County Medical Examiner Dr. Eleanor Sharma arrived at the scene to perform a preliminary assessment before the body was transferred to the morgue. After carefully examining the wounds, she confirmed that Ben had been shot 8 times, 3 shots to the head and 5 to the torso. The gunshots were fired from behind, suggesting Ben may not have seen his attacker or had turned his back in an attempt to flee. The absence of any defensive wounds on Ben's arms or hands further supported the theory that he was ambushed from behind. Dr. Sharma estimated the time of death to be between 2:00 and 4:00 p.m. based on body temperature and the extent of rigor mortis. This meant Ben had died several hours before Lynlee discovered the body around 7:00 p.m. Crime scene technicians discovered and collected 7 spent 9mm shell casings, a common and easy-to-purchase ammunition type. However, no weapon was found at the scene. The crime scene held many suspicious elements that Lieutenant Colonel Green and his team quickly took note of. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle, despite a thorough examination of all entry points on the farm. All windows were intact, and none of the locks showed evidence of tampering. The security cameras Ben had installed to protect his valuable snake collection appeared to have been turned off several hours before the incident. a detail that especially drew investigators' attention. This suggested Ben may have willingly opened the door to his killer, someone he knew and trusted. Evidence showed no signs of a struggle at the entrance, and Ben appeared to have been shot while working in the main breeding area. Investigators noted Ben was wearing his usual work attire, with rubber gloves placed near a table used for handling snakes. A young python was found in an open plastic container, indicating Ben may have been in the middle of inspecting or feeding it when he was attacked. He sold on the international black market for far more than their listed price. Even the small safe in Ben's office, where he typically kept cash for employee payments and daily expenses, was untouched. This further convinced investigators that the motive was not financial, but likely personal. Another notable detail was the blood evidence at the scene. In addition to the large pool of blood around Ben's body, crime scene technicians also discovered blood spatter on the walls and nearby snake enclosures, indicating the assailant fired multiple close-range shots. These blood samples were carefully collected for analysis, with the hope of finding the attacker's DNA if they were accidentally injured during the attack. Footprints in the blood also told an interesting story. There were at least two distinct sets, one smaller, possibly belonging to a woman or a small-framed man, and one larger, clearly male. These footprints led toward the door, suggesting the individuals had fled the scene quickly after the shooting. Notably, the prints did not match the soles of Lynlee's shoes, who claimed to be the first person to discover the body. As investigators expanded the search area beyond the farm, they discovered fresh tire tracks on a little used dirt road behind the property. This road led to a small wooded area and then connected to a rural highway, providing a little-known escape route from the farm. The tire tracks were carefully cast, and forensic experts estimated they came from a mid-sized sedan, possibly a Toyota Camry or Honda Accord, common vehicles that would be hard to trace without more identifying information. As investigators began looking into Ben Renick's life, they built a picture of a talented man with a successful business and a young family. Friends and neighbors described Ben as a devoted father and a thoughtful husband. Although his snake farm demanded much of his time, Ben always tried to arrange his schedule to attend family events and school performances for Lynlee's son. Meanwhile, Lynlee was described as a radiant woman, socially adept, and someone who turned heads when she entered a room. She owned a Sentia spa in an upscale Columbia neighborhood, where she offered premium spa services, skincare treatments, and eyebrow tattooing. However, as the investigation progressed, cracks began to appear in the seemingly perfect story of Ben and Lynlee's family life. During her third interrogation, under growing pressure from investigators, and as evidence slowly mounted, Lynlee admitted that their relationship had been strained in recent months. She described intense arguments over money, the time Ben spent at the farm instead of with family, and disagreements over parenting. Lynlee admitted she had considered divorce but was worried about the financial impact, as most of their assets were tied to the snake farm, an enterprise she had neither the knowledge nor interest to manage. Then, the relationship began with innocent messages on social media but quickly escalated into secret lunch dates and hotel rendezvous after work. Lynlee said the affair with Brandon ended before Ben was killed, once she realized Brandon was only interested in her for her money and status. She acknowledged that Ben had found out about her infidelity, and they were trying to repair their marriage. According to Lynlee, Ben discovered the affair through messages on her phone, and although he was initially furious, he agreed to forgive her and work to save the marriage for the sake of their children. These revelations opened up a new investigative path. Detectives began digging deeper into Lynlee Renick's life and relationships. They tracked down Brandon Blackwell using social media profiles and spa records. Brandon, whose arms were covered in tattoos and who had a history of minor drug offenses and assaults, became a person of interest. Financial investigator Jessica Morin of the MHP discovered a disturbing pattern when examining the SBA's business records. Outwardly, the establishment appeared to be thriving with a luxurious location and high-end equipment, but in reality, it was drowning in debt. Financial reports showed the business had operated at a loss for 3 consecutive years, with increasing debts to vendors, overdue rent, and a large business loan nearing default. More specifically, Moran found multiple unpaid tax liabilities, totaling over $35,000 owed to the IRS. Numerous overdue invoices from spa product and equipment suppliers had led some vendors to only accept cash payments due to the SBA's poor payment history. The SBA's bank account was frequently overdrawn, and at least 3 times in the 6 months leading up to the murder, Lynlee had written bad checks to employees. Furthermore, Lynlee failed to disclose to investigators that she was facing a lawsuit from a former spa employee named Rachel Thompson over unpaid wages. Rachel had worked as a massage therapist at Essentia for nearly a year, but quit after going more than 2 months without pay. The lawsuit, filed 2 months before Ben's death, sought over $8,000 in unpaid wages, plus penalties and attorney's fees. Interviews with other spa employees revealed that Lynlee frequently complained about financial struggles and Ben's refusal to invest more in her business. An esthetician named Jennifer Miller recalled that just weeks before the murder, Lynlee had been forced to sell her Lexus SUV to cover an urgent business debt, an act that left her furious and upset. Lynlee blamed Ben, saying he was deliberately keeping her financially dependent. This financial situation became particularly suspicious when investigators learned that Ben was about to finalize a deal to sell a large portion of his snake collection for $1.2 million, a sum from which Lynlee would benefit significantly as his wife. In addition, Ben held a $1 million life insurance policy with Lynlee as the beneficiary. These findings revealed a powerful financial motive behind Ben's death. Investigator Green noted that if Ben died before the snake sale was completed, the money from the sale, along with the life insurance, would go to Lynlee without restrictions on how it was used. On the other hand, if Ben had lived, he might have reinvested most of the proceeds into new business ventures or used it to expand the snake farm, rather than letting Lynlee use it for her failing spa. The combination of financial difficulties, a troubled marriage, and the prospect of a large payout created a classic motive scenario for a homicide. Nearly a year passed without a major breakthrough in the case. Investigators had gathered extensive information about Lynlee's potential motive, her affair, and even past attempts to harm Ben, but still lacked the critical evidence needed to charge her. Forensic samples from the scene, including fingerprints, footprints, and DNA, did not match Lynlee or Brandon. The murder weapon remained missing, and no witnesses had seen anyone arrive or leave the farm around the time of the murder. To the public, the case gradually faded from the headlines, becoming one of the many unsolved crimes in the area. But for Lieutenant Green and his team, it remained an obsession. They continued to follow every lead, re-interview witnesses, and re-examine every detail of the case, believing that even the smallest piece of information could unlock the entire mystery. Pressure from Ben's family, especially his brother Sam Renick, mounted as the one-year anniversary of the crime approached. Sam had become the legal guardian of Ben's 2 children, caring for them, while Lynlee gradually cut ties and moved to another city to start over. Ben's brother had even hired a private investigator to run a parallel investigation, and frequently called Lieutenant Green for updates. Meanwhile, Lynlee seemed to have moved on with her life. She closed her spa in Colombia and relocated to Kansas City, where she opened a new spa under a different name, using part of Ben's life insurance payout. She ended her relationship with Brandon and began dating a local businessman. On social media, she portrayed the image of a strong, single mother rebuilding her life after a tragedy. Her posts often praised Ben as a wonderful father and husband, expressed sorrow over his death, and conveyed frustration that the police had yet to find his killer. To those unaware of the investigation's details, Lynlee appeared to be a grieving widow trying to move forward. But to investigators, her actions, especially the quick use of the insurance money and sudden move, only heightened suspicion. Still, suspicion alone was not evidence, and the case remained unsolved. Then, suddenly, in early 2019, nearly 2 years after Ben's death, the investigative team received a phone call from a new witness, Ashley Shaw, a former employee at Lynlee's spa. Ashley, a 25-year-old woman with dyed red hair and several small tattoos, had worked at Essentia Spa for about 6 months before Ben's murder, primarily handling reception and appointment scheduling. Ashley contacted the police after moving to another state and starting a new life. She explained that fear and guilt had kept her silent for too long, but she could no longer bear it. Nightmares and anxiety had haunted her for the past 2 years, and she felt the need to tell the truth in order to move on with her life. Ashley's testimony opened up an entirely new angle in the case. According to her, she not only knew about Lynlee's relationship with Brandon and the financial struggles of the spa, but had also directly participated in the plot to kill Ben. Ashley stated that she had helped Lynlee plan Ben's murder. The first attempt involved poisoning with rat poison, as Brandon had mentioned in his own statement. But unlike Brandon's account, Ashley revealed that after the failed poisoning, Lynlee did not give up her plan to kill her husband. According to Ashley, Lynlee confided in her about her financial troubles and her relationship with Brandon. Lynlee often spoke openly about the spa's financial situation when they were alone, expressing anger and frustration over Ben's refusal to invest more money into the business. She also admitted to the failed attempt to poison Ben with rat poison and expressed disappointment that it hadn't worked. Ashley explained that her relationship with Lynlee had developed into a close friendship. Lynlee convinced her that Ben was a controlling and emotionally abusive husband who was deliberately sabotaging her success and keeping her financially dependent. Ashley, who had herself previously experienced an abusive relationship, deeply sympathized with what she believed was Lynlee's situation. Lynlee also persuaded her that the spa would be far more successful if she could access Ben's money, promising Ashley a management position with a significantly higher salary once the financial situation improved. Gradually, their conversations shifted from complaints about Ben to discussions about how Lynlee could completely escape the marriage and gain financial independence. Lynlee began to say that Ben was worth more dead than alive, referencing his life insurance policy and an upcoming snake sale deal. At first, Ashley thought these were just angry outbursts, but she eventually realized Lynlee was seriously considering killing her husband. What Ashley revealed next completely changed the course of the investigation. She testified that on June 8, 2017, she and Lynlee drove to Ben's snake farm with Michael Humphrey, an old high school boyfriend of Lynlee's whom she had reconnected with a few months earlier. Michael, a tall man with a criminal record for substance abuse and theft, had agreed to help Lynlee in exchange for a promised payout from Ben's life insurance. Ashley stated that afterward, the group agreed on a story. Lynlee would return to the farm a few hours later, pretending to discover Ben's body after being unable to reach him. Ashley and Michael would remain silent about their roles. Lynlee reassured them that no one would suspect her because she had an alibi. She planned to return to the spa immediately and continue working as if nothing had happened, creating a public presence. Before leaving the area, Michael discarded the gun, a 9mm Glock Lynlee had purchased weeks earlier through an acquaintance, into a nearby creek. They didn't speak about the murder again for months, until Ashley could no longer bear the weight of her guilt and decided to contact the police. Ashley's testimony provided investigators with the missing link they had been searching for. They now had a motive, connections between the suspects, and a detailed account of how the murder was carried out. However, they still needed physical evidence and corroboration from Michael Humphrey to strengthen their case. Investigators quickly tracked down Michael Humphrey and discovered he had moved to Jefferson City, Missouri, about an hour's drive from New Florence. Michael, 37, had a steady job at a local warehouse and seemed to be living a quiet life with his new girlfriend. There was no clear indication he had received a large, unusual sum of money, something the investigators had hoped to see if Lynlee had paid him from the insurance proceeds. When confronted with the evidence in Ashley's testimony, Michael initially denied any involvement. He claimed that although he knew Lynlee from high school, they hadn't spoken in years and he didn't even know about Ben's death until he saw it on the local news. However, when investigators revealed that they had evidence placing him at the crime scene, including cell phone records showing his phone had connected to towers near the farm at the time of the murder, and a witness who saw his car near the farm, Michael began to change his story. At first, he admitted that he had indeed been near the farm that day, but only to meet Lynlee and discuss an old debt she owed him. He claimed they met at a nearby gas station, talked in his car for about 15 minutes, and then he left without ever setting foot on the farm. But as investigators continued to press and informed him that Ashley had fully cooperated and that Lynlee was soon to be arrested, Michael finally broke down and admitted his role in the murder. However, his version of events differed significantly from Ashley's. Michael claimed that while he had indeed accompanied Lynlee and Ashley to the farm on the day Ben was killed and had agreed to help with the plan, it was Lynlee who actually shot Ben, while he merely stood guard. According to Michael, Lynlee entered the farm first, spoke with Ben for a few minutes, and then signaled for Michael to come in. When Michael entered, Ben had his back turned and was handling a snake in a container. Lynlee pulled a gun from her purse, walked up behind her husband and fired multiple shots into his back and head. Michael described being shocked by the level of violence and gore, so much so that he ran outside and vomited. When he returned, Lynlee handed him the gun and asked him to dispose of it. In a panic, he complied, throwing it into a creek, as Ashley had described. Michael said he had been manipulated by Lynlee into participating, lured by the promise of a share of the insurance money and a chance to rekindle their romantic relationship. Promises he claimed were never fulfilled. Michael also confirmed Lynlee's earlier poisoning attempt and provided further details, stating that Lynlee had purchased rat poison from a local hardware store using a fake identity and mixed it into Ben's favorite drink, a lemon iced tea he often drank while working at the farm. The attempt failed because Ben only took a small sip before noticing the bitter taste and discarding the rest, becoming only mildly ill instead of fatally poisoned. With Michael's confession and Ashley's testimony, investigators felt they had enough evidence to make arrests. On January 13, 2020, Nearly 3 years after Ben Renick's death, Lynlee Renick was arrested at her new spa in Kansas City and charged with first-degree murder. Michael Humphrey was also arrested and faced the same charge. Michael Humphrey's trial came first, in October 2021. The delay was partly due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted court operations nationwide. During the trial, prosecutors presented a strong case built on Ashley Shaw's testimony, cell phone records placing Michael at the crime scene, and his own confession to police. Michael's defense team tried to argue that he had been manipulated by Lynlee and was unaware of the murder plot until it was too late. They claimed that while he was present at the scene, it was Lynlee who carried out the killing, and Michael was merely an unwilling witness who later helped cover up the crime out of fear of being charged as an accomplice. However, with overwhelming evidence against him, including his confession and his admission of discarding the murder weapon, Michael Humphrey was convicted of first-degree murder. But in a surprising twist, after his conviction, Michael agreed to cooperate with prosecutors and testify against Lynlee in exchange for a lighter sentence. He changed his testimony, now asserting that although he was present, it was Lynlee who had pulled the trigger and shot Ben. Lynlee Renick's trial began in December 2021. The courtroom was packed as prosecutors laid out a detailed case. Prosecutors painted the picture of an ambitious and angry woman who had decided her husband was worth more dead than alive. They presented evidence of the spa's financial troubles, the large sums Lynlee stood to gain from life insurance and the snake business sale, and her extramarital affair with Brandon Blackwell, all powerful motives for murder. Both Ashley Shaw and Michael Humphrey testified against Lynlee, detailing her role in planning and carrying out the murder. Brandon Blackwell also testified, confirming Lynlee's previous discussions about wanting Ben dead and her earlier attempt to poison him. Another key piece of evidence came from another spa employee named Jennifer Miller, who testified that Lynlee had confessed to killing Ben during a private conversation several months after the murder. According to Jennifer, Lynlee had grown nervous as the police investigation continued and confided in her, admitting she had planned and committed the murder with Michael's help. Jennifer had kept quiet out of fear of retaliation from Lynlee, but ultimately decided to come forward after hearing Ashley's testimony. Lynlee's defense attempted to undermine the credibility of both Ashley and Michael, emphasizing that both had motives to lie, Ashley to avoid being charged as an accomplice, and Michael to reduce his sentence. They also suggested that Ben may have had enemies in the highly competitive reptile industry, and that his murder could have stemmed from business dealings rather than family issues. Lynlee took the stand in her own defense, denying any involvement in her husband's death. She described Ben as a wonderful husband, probably out of jealousy over her success or to escape accountability for their own actions. When the verdict was announced, Lynlee showed no emotion, standing straight and staring ahead. Across the courtroom, Ben's family, including his brother Sam and their elderly parents, embraced in tears, a mixture of relief and sorrow. They finally had justice for their beloved son and brother, though no verdict could ever bring Ben back. In January 2022, Lynlee Renick was sentenced to 16 years in prison for second-degree murder. Michael Humphrey, who had accepted a plea deal and testified against Lynlee, received a 10-year sentence. Ashley Shaw, due to her early cooperation, was not charged as an accomplice but was convicted of perjury and received a suspended sentence, along with 100 hours of community service. The Ben Renick case is a story of greed, betrayal, and tragic consequences, but also one of persistence in the pursuit of justice and the enduring power of a positive legacy. It reminds us that behind every sensational headline and chilling detail of a murder case, there are real people with lives, dreams, and relationships that have been destroyed. For Sam Renick and his family, justice was served, even if it could never fully compensate for their loss. For the reptile breeding community, a pioneer was lost too soon, but his work continues to inspire others. And for Lynlee Renick, Michael Humphrey, and Ashley Shaw, their actions have forever altered their lives and those around them, a painful reminder of the consequences of selfish choices. Looking back on this case, perhaps the most important lesson is about the value of patience, persistence, and honesty, not only in criminal investigations but in everyday life. Ben Renick was someone who spent his life patiently nurturing and caring for creatures that were often misunderstood. The tragic irony is that he became the victim of the people he trusted most, but his legacy has outlived that betrayal.